experienced some technical issue today, and while we are still waiting for the host to, because we got connected like a minute here, then things happen on his side, on Professor Joe's side, and then he has to work on the computer, everything from starting from scratch. So that's why he's not here yet, but then he is working so hard in fixing the issue. But please allow me to jump in at the very beginning, like what we did last time, to talk about our AY Asia Pacific Young Scientists Association 3-minute thesis competition. Thank you so much. And I saw those familiar names over here. I'm so excited for you to come and join us today. Okay, not here yet. Thank you so much. And I see, hi, Fiona, you're here. And I see George, you're here. So many people, old friends. Thank you so much for coming. When we have Professor Liu, thank you so much for coming. Thank you for turning on your camera as well. Hi, George. You're on mute.
Hello.
Hello. So
How are
great to
you?
see you
Good to see you.
again. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you very
Hello, can you
much.
hear me?
Hello, good morning from Bangladesh.
Hello. You're on a bus. What? Thank you so much for making time and in joining all these great platform and learning. We also have John and we have Guangyu joining from UBC here as well. So no further ado, please allow me to start talking about our AP AYS A3MT, the 3-minute thesis competition. So far, we have a really a big gratitude, thank College of Forestry, for for Northeast Forestry University and College of Forestry at Beijing Forestry University as the big sponsor and also the co-organizer of the 3-minute thesis for us this year. Then we are now inviting your senior graduates and graduate students and postdoc students to join this competition. Please help me, help us, and help everybody to encourage our students to submit their competition to join, to have the experience to see what these would, to have them shine out there. So the deadline is coming very soon. Before you know it, it will be here very soon. And also for the students, for example, your undergrad students, if you think they're not ready yet, I would still highly recommend you to encourage them to probably, invite them to sign up the live competition so that they can watch how others and their peers and seeing their future and what they can do out there, and they can join this competition in the future. So that is my hope. And I hope that we will have many people can join, and if they're not participating, they can still be there live and watching and learning. This is a great platform for them to learn from each other. And also it's meant to be for our students in the Asia Pacific region. So please help to push, and then get students, please. I know that some of you have been doing that. Our partner universities as well in China, and they're hosting their local competitions and will be sending the students to us soon. But at the same time, I am eagerly waiting for more submissions. And now I want to have more students from around, the Asia Pacific rim. So do help me, do help us to make these message going out to invite more students be there. It will be a learning opportunity for them, and it will be, I think, a good community building around the forestry education, right? And then it's great to have those like if it is doable, organize a watching session out there in a classroom, and that will be a fun or great opportunity for students watch that together and exchange ideas and see how others are doing. This is just a quick thought of how to build our students community as well. Anyways, let me check whether Professor Joe has arrived yet. Seems no. Okay, so let me check. Professor Joe, are you there? If no, then I will do the introduction. Please allow me to do so. Then Professor Joe, when he arrives, and he may host our Q&A session. So tonight that we are very thrilled to have our professor and also my colleague as well, Professor Fernanda Tomaselli over here. Hi, Fernanda. And with over 5 years of experience teaching higher education courses related to forestry and climate change and sustainability, Dr. Tomaselli is known for her interdisciplinary expertise in environmental communication, ecological economics, and conservation. Her teaching philosophy focuses on inspiring students to actively engage with sustainability challenges and empowering them to seek solutions to pressing environmental issues through the interactive and experiential learning. So in recognition of her commitment to innovate education, I think tonight we have, when I throw these out and then I receive emails immediately replying to me saying that, oh, this is very interesting. I want to be there. So this is very encouraging. And thank you so much, Dr. Tomaselli, for coming tonight. And I think that Professor Joe probably is making it just into our room. So let's see. I think that Professor Joe just made it like 2 seconds ago. Hi, Professor Joe. Did you make it? Professor Joe? Professor Joe, I think that I see you joining the, if you could unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hi, Professor Joe. Thank you so
Hi.
much for being here.
Oh.
You made it.
Yeah. Finally, I'm here.
Yeah, and you haven't turned on your camera yet, but thank you so much. I just read through the introduction to Dr. Tomaselli.
Yeah, I will try to fix it. Give me a second, okay? I try.
Yes, no worries. So I just want to, say that Professor Joe, Xiaojian Zhou, is from Southwest Forestry University from China. And it is a great pleasure to have him to be the host of our presentation tonight. And this presentation will be recorded.
Finally, I cannot switch on my camera. It's strange.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, anyway.
Yeah, so let me start recording right now.
Okay. Okay.
Recording in progress.
All right.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. Good morning and good evening. Someone in the North American already evening. So a very warm welcome to our webinar. I'm so sorry. I apologize. Just now, my computer was broken. I don't know why. So now I try to fix it, and I will start to host this session for today. For those of you join from different time zones around the world, we are delighted to have you with us. My name is Zhou Xiaojian from Southwest Forestry University of China, and I will be your host and moderator for today's session. This is an online meeting, and so let me just cover a few quick housekeeping items to ensure everything runs smoothly. And maybe some of you need to mute your microphone when you are not speaking to minimize background noise. We encourage you to turn your video on if possible, but unfortunately I cannot switch on my video. Sorry. And after the Fernando presentation, we have the question and comments session. So if you have some question and comments, or you can hand it up or maybe leave your message in the chat box. And maybe I don't know, this presentation will be recorded or not, Lee. I don't know, or maybe the
it is recorded already. It's being recorded already.
Also, the slide will be shared with all the participants or not. I don't know, but we can confirm after that. And so now let's dive into our next session. To start, it is my great pleasure to introduce our speaker, Dr. Fernanda Tomaselli, Assistant Professor of Teaching and Coordinator of the Land 1 program from University of British Columbia. Firstly, please allow me to briefly introduce Fernanda Tomaselli. With over 5 years of experience teaching higher education courses related to forestry, climate change, and sustainability, Dr. Fernanda Tomaselli is known for her interdisciplinary expertise in environmental communication, ecological economics, and conservation. Her teaching philosophy focuses on inspiring students to actively engage with the sustainability challenge and empowering them to seek solutions to pressing environmental issues through interactive and experiential learning. In recognition of her commitment to innovative education, she received the 2023 to 2024 Killam Teaching Prize in Forestry and the 2024 D2L Innovation Award in Teaching and Learning from the Society for Teaching and Learning in Higher Education. Today, she will be presenting on teaching in an age of climate action, pedagogies of care, hope, and agents in the classroom. Fernanda Tomaselli, now the virtual floor is yours, please.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that kind introduction, and thank you so much everyone for being here. It's afternoon, evening here in Vancouver, but I know that for many of you it's quite early in the morning. Yeah, so I'll start. I'm going to share my slides. Perfect. Okay, and let me just put it in presentation mode. Great. So John, can you see the slides? Okay, wonderful. So feel free to interrupt me at any point if anyone has any questions. I probably won't be able to look at the chat, but June, if you see any comments or something, please let me know. Yeah, and feel free to ask any questions. Like, hopefully this will be a conversation. I have left a space at the end for a discussion as well on this topic. So before I begin, I just wanted to provide a little bit of information on like why am I interested on this topic. So I, like, my educational background lies in environmental communication. So since I was an undergraduate student back in Ecuador, where I am from, I was very interested in how to engage people to become interested in sustainability issues and conservation issues. So Ecuador is one of the most biodiverse countries in the world, but we face lots of challenges regarding managing our resources sustainably. So I was always interested in, how can we harmonize having a good economy while at the same time, respecting the limits of the environment, and how to always work with people to generate, positive outcomes for people and for the environment. So that has sort of informed all of my career. And in terms of my teaching philosophy, I'm really interested, as it was mentioned, like in supporting students in thinking about what can be solutions to sustainability issues. I often don't tell them what solutions are because I don't know, but it's more like encouraging people to think of themselves as active agents in creating solutions, whatever solutions we need all solutions basically. Yeah, and also another aspect of my teaching philosophy that I will talk today is it's called holistic education, and it's the idea of trying to engage the student like sort of their heads, like, yes, like, we provide information and they learn, but also try to engage their hands, like, having practical activities that help them learn, but also how to engage the student in a holistic way with their emotions as well. Today, we will talk a lot about emotions, specifically climate anxiety. So yeah, so my philosophy is like how to connect all three, like basically the head, the hands, and the heart of people so that their learning experience is better. The courses that I teach, that's relevant to the lecture today because I do teach courses related to conservation, but the one that will come more often, I teach a climate change course. It's called Visualizing Climate Change. It's a second year level course, focus a little bit on climate science, but mostly about climate politics and climate communications. And it's a course that takes the students from the Faculty of Forestry, but 30%, something like that, maybe a bit more, are from students from all programs across UBC. Yes, and yeah, so I will connect quite a lot with that course. And my educational research is now related to the topic that I will talk today. So basically, I'm trying to work on like how to develop better pedagogies to support the students in their learning about climate change and how to encourage a greater sense of agency and how to inspire more action. Yeah, and this topic matters. I think that most people or all of us like concerned about the environment, sustainability, and this topic of climate anxiety is becoming more relevant. I'll give you data today as to what the numbers say, and doesn't really matter where you are. It is becoming more and more prominent, especially among the youth. So as instructors, it's really important for us to be sort of acknowledging that this is happening. Yeah, so the agenda for today, basically, I'll talk very briefly about the severity of climate change, where we are in terms of climate change very broadly. And then I will focus more on youth. So although climate change will affect everyone pretty much, youth are sort of particularly affected by climate change. So I'll talk why, and then I'll go right into the numbers in terms of climate anxiety among the youth. So there has been new studies, lots of new studies happening, global studies, and I'll give a little bit of data regarding that, but also how climate anxiety impacts student learning and why it can have a negative impact in student learning. And then I'll move on to talk about the pedagogies, like what, based on the literature, what are some pedagogies that we can use to sort of care about the students, but also support their learning as well. And then I'll provide some examples of classroom strategies that I have been using in my classrooms. And, hopefully you can use maybe similar or related strategies. And at the end, I'll talk about some limits and cautions, of things that we can think about when we think about the topic of climate anxiety in the classroom. Yeah, so just a brief background on climate change. So I think we all know climate change is happening. It is, becoming more serious. So what you have in the screen now, it's basically data of global average temperature since pre-industrial. And actually the baseline is compared to the temperature of the last century. What you can clearly see, and I think we all know, is that the climate is warming, like the global average temperature is increasing. But something that can be like really scary, it definitely scares me, is like if you look at the last two lines, I don't know if you can see my mouse, the last two lines are basically the last 2 years. So 2023, which was the hottest year on record, and then 2024, which was it exceeded the record in 2023 by quite a lot. We exceeded 1.5 degrees for 2024. 2025 may not be as warm, maybe it's a bit colder, but it sort of, continues showing the trend that the climate is warming, and it is warming quite fast. The last 10 years on record, the last 10 years have been the warmest years on record. So, it's a reality that we're facing. Yes, so yeah, it's basically official, and it has warmed at least until 2024 by last year was 1.6 degrees Celsius. So quite a lot. Yes, and this is related to CO2 emissions and to CO2 concentrations. And something that we are seeing is that although the rate of growth of CO2 emissions has gone down a little bit, we are still growing the amount of emissions that we put into the environment. So although we have global agreements to tackle climate change, we are not really sort of reducing the emissions that CO2 emissions that we put into the environment yet. And of course, this correlates with the amount of CO2 that we find in the atmosphere, and it's growing every year. So I teach climate change, and every year I do have to update my slides with all of these numbers because they change. And unfortunately, it's not like they are stable or going down. CO2 concentrations are increasing at, about 2 parts per million every year. Yeah, so and there have been CO2 concentrations potentially they have not, in 3 million years, they have not been this high. So, it's scary data to some degree. We are seeing climate change used to be more distant, I think, for a lot of people, but at least where I live and where I come from, it is definitely becoming more evident. So this is just on the left side of the screen, a map of temperature anomalies on, this is in June, on 2021. So we had what we call the 2021 heat dome. So it was a very extreme heat event in British Columbia, and we broke records in terms of temperature in Canada, for instance. And scientists concluded afterwards that this event was almost impossible without climate change. And we have, hundreds of people that died because of the heat, mostly. And of course, this correlated in that year, with fire. So Lytton, that is the town that you see there, broke the record in terms of temperature, and the next day it's a town that also burned because of wildfires. So yes, so we are seeing, more of these events. This is a map of South America, where I come from, and this is also a map from last year. So last year, almost the whole continent was very, very dry. It was, a bit scary, I think, for many people. So just to give you an example, in Ecuador, most of our electricity comes from hydropower, and there was a point where rivers were so dry that we basically didn't have electricity for sometimes 6, 8, 10 hours a day. And there was in the Amazon rainforest also, fires. So things, that are also relatively unusual, like the Amazon rainforest is a rainforest, is not an ecosystem that depends on fires. And we are now seeing, fires in the Amazon, rivers that are very dry. So they are due potentially to multiple causes, but climate change is definitely exacerbating many of these issues. So making climate change more real and more close, I think, to people. So why does this matter? So I think it matters to everyone because most people on this planet, if not all, will be affected to some degree or another. But why does it really matter to youth more, potentially more than maybe older generations? So young people will face the greater long-term climate impacts. So they will be, by default, longer time on this planet. Hopefully, if we tackle climate change, they won't see huge impacts. But if we really don't do that much, they will see, lots of the impacts of climate change longer than older generations. There's research coming out that shows that in general, there's a great disillusionment with failure of older generations to adequately confront this challenge. There's very little faith in governments, for instance, that governments will do something about climate change. So in general, there's sort of a feeling that the older generations have failed, right? To some degree in tackling the challenge, and are failing the young generations that will have to face this for most of their lives. Also, youth, because they will be longer on this planet, are key to shaping climate futures. So we don't really know what will happen with climate change because we don't know what we will do. Maybe and hopefully we will mitigate many, we will reduce our emissions and hopefully don't get, to 2 degrees Celsius increase in temperature. But youth are key in shaping these climate futures because they will be, the agents of change basically in the next decades coming. Also, we know that climate knowledge rises with age. So as the students and youth, go in school, they know more about climate change. But at the same time, we have seen from research that willingness to take action and sense of agency, so the sense that they can do something about this crisis, declines as young people progress through school. So their feeling that they can do something about it goes down, although their knowledge goes up. So that's pretty interesting. There's also a growing belief that it may be too late to do something about it. So I have students that are like, is it already too late? And yeah, so ideally, we did not want to exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius. We'll see where we are, but the 1.5 degrees Celsius is like almost out of reach at this point. And in general, there's this hate and hopelessness, right? Like it's like a big challenge, a huge challenge. And climate change is one challenge that we're facing among many other things that are happening in the planet. So it's this hopelessness, right? And powerlessness about, I see the world around me, but I feel I have no power in changing that world. So this takes me to the topic of climate anxiety. So what is climate anxiety? So it has been defined as this general distress or nervousness, we can say, related to the state of the climate and/or the environment. So sometimes we can hear the term environmental anxiety, eco-anxiety. Climate anxiety would be more specifically about climate change, but definitely there's ecological anxiety, right? Like general despair about the state of the environment. It has been labeled as this chronic fear as well of, environmental doom, like the idea that, oh my God, like systems, may unravel, natural systems, and, we may face, I don't know, ecological collapse. And it is definitely connected with other emotions, like, as we said, chronic fear. So fear is one of them. Worry, sadness, very connected to sadness, anger, grief. So this feeling, that we are losing something, helplessness, despair. So the literature in general has treated climate anxiety as sort of this one-dimension thing that incorporates the fear, the sadness, but lately there has been more research that is trying to differentiate these different constructs because they are different. So now we can find different scales, for example, for measuring anxiety in comparison to measuring grief, for example. And there's a lot of research that is happening on these topics. Also, climate anxiety is multidimensional. So it affects people in different ways. It can have affective symptoms like, I feel nervous about it. I don't know. I learn about climate change or see the latest climate numbers and I feel, my heart is, I feel my heart more. So it has those symptoms, in our affective, behavioral and functional impairment as well. So this means that climate anxiety can get to the point where you cannot sleep because you are very nervous about climate change, or you cannot focus at work because you're thinking about, I'm really scared about climate change, so I'm too nervous to focus, and there are other ways in which it generates this functional impairment. Rumination. So this is when you think very repetitively about something. So we have also measured to some degree some research about how climate change affects people in the sense that they cannot stop thinking about climate change. And then also it generates anxiety about one's own negative impact. Like, pretty much like a lot of the things we do will produce more carbon emissions. So, that anxiety that, whether I eat, I sleep, I travel, that generates emissions because the whole system is sort of tied in, fossil fuels, and it's a high carbon society. Yeah, so it's sort of expressed in multiple ways. So as I mentioned, there's more and more research happening in terms of climate anxiety. This is the first, what we could call the first global study measuring climate anxiety. It's global in the sense that they included 10 countries, so they didn't survey all countries on the planet, but it's 10 countries. But these countries come from the global north and the global south. They basically surveyed 10,000 young people. By young, we mean 16 years old to 25 years old. So our university students would be, within this group of youth. So they surveyed 10,000 people and about 1,000 people in each country. So what we can see from the data of this 2021 study is that more than 50% of respondents are either very or extremely worried about climate change. Something very interesting, previously there was a thought that eco-anxiety or climate anxiety was a global north phenomenon, like something that happened in rich countries. But what we see here is that it's not at all, that you can find it in, all countries pretty much, and actually global south countries like the Philippines, India, and Brazil have the highest rates of eco-anxiety. Like Philippines, for instance, like more than 80% of respondents would say that they are either very or extremely concerned about climate change. and more than 60% in India and Brazil. This study, the interpretation that they did to these findings was that these countries, for instance, the Philippines has faced a lot of climate impacts. Same with India and same with Brazil, for instance. So there's sort of a little bit more of anxiety and awareness related to those climate impacts. Yeah, but still, eco-anxiety is definitely prevalent and present in developed nations as well. There was one study done in Canada that shows very similar numbers too. Yeah, so as we said, anxiety is one of the feelings, but there are other feelings associated with it. So climate change makes me feel sad. So about 70% of respondents are afraid, so fearful, anxious, of course, angry. So it makes youth angry. We will talk soon about their views on government action, so potentially connected to inaction. Feel powerless. So the idea that, you don't have any power to change things, guilty, and that likely connects to the fact that, we are contributing to this issue. And one positive emotion, optimistic, 30% of people, and then indifferent. That would be a more, I don't know if a negative emotion or an indifferent emotion. So yeah, so climate change, the question climate change negatively affects my daily life and functioning. So a little bit less than 50% of respondents, yes, accepting that, it affects their daily life and functioning. And again, this is usually in relation to, I have problems sleeping at night, I cannot concentrate on work because of climate change, etc. Yeah, and as you can see, in some nations like India, Philippines, this is also like very, very high. So apologies for putting this table with so many numbers. I just want to call your attention to just a few of interesting data. So the question here was like climate change makes me hesitant, in this case to have children, for instance, and you can see like 39% of youth will say like, I'm afraid to have children because of climate change. This feeling like very negative, humanity is doomed, like very negative, 56% of youth saying humanity is doomed. The future is frightening. Like this one is like 76% of youth feeling that, like I'm afraid of the future. Yeah. Also in this global survey, they ask questions regarding the government. So what are your thoughts regarding what government is doing about climate change? And again, it sort of paints a very negative picture of how youth views the government in sense of what they are doing. So basically, taking my concerns seriously, like 64% saying that the government is not taking their concerns seriously, that the government is not doing enough to avoid climate catastrophe, similarly 64%. Like the government can be trusted, again 60%. So overall there's this general sense that adults, and in this case the government, is not doing enough to tackle this global challenge. Yeah, so the double-edged role of climate anxiety. So the question is climate anxiety all that bad? Like, okay, and the literature has I wouldn't say contradictory findings, but opposite findings to some degree. So climate anxiety is a very healthy and natural reaction to the climate threat. So having the climate change, it's a huge global issue, and it's very natural when you see, those, data of like global temperatures, or when you start realizing that, oh, now we are seeing climate impacts in our backyards. It's a very healthy reaction to feel anxiety. It would be actually not that normal not to feel anxiety. It shows also that individuals care about the state of the planet to some degree. So, positive. So eco-anxiety is a rational reaction to the enormity of the ecological threat humanity and the planet is facing, because the threat is really huge and global. It is connected to some forms of climate action. So anxiety can be positive in the sense that it can bring attention to the issue and it can inspire people to do something about it. And it has been called sort of adaptive, like this idea of practical anxiety, that it's connected with, motivation and hopes. Like, okay, I'm concerned about it, I'm anxious, but I do have a hope for the future. Therefore, I'll move on to, change that future and contribute to a better future. Having said that, anxiety about the environmental crisis can also create paralysis, apathy, inaction, and burnout. So basically, this is the idea that too much anxiety can just make people too fearful about the future and create basically paralysis. It has been labeled the fourth stage of denial. Why? In the sense that if it brings in action, then it's just not effective. Yeah. And anxiety may be a rational response to the world that climate models predict, but it is also unsustainable in the sense that a human being cannot sustain anxiety in a healthy way for a very long time. So how does climate anxiety affect the student learning? So now I'm going to go a little bit more into the pedagogies and the strategies. Yeah, so what we know is that there's an association between higher climate anxiety and difficulties with concentration and cognitive challenges. So of course, if you are extremely worried about climate change and you are very nervous about it, and you just think about climate change, it's harder to focus on other things. These factors can definitely undermine study persistence and academic planning. There is more research, not a lot, but more also happening in terms of climate anxiety among students that study environmental sciences or an environmentally related field, because those students are more exposed to this type of information. So we also know that emotions mediate how students engage cognitively and their development of skills and capacities. So emotions are an important moderator for learning, for sure. And also we know from meta-analysis that student well-being is correlated with academic success. So if we can support the student well-being, we are hopefully supporting their learning and their academic success as well. So how can the educational system respond? So this is based on the literature. So we know, at least as of 2020, that climate anxiety remains largely unspoken in the educational system. So we don't really have a lot of talks about, what is this? Is it happening? What should we do about it? At UBC, we're changing a little bit. There are programs about climate and well-being, for example, but in general, the educational system is still not talking much about it. And in terms of research, pedagogical research, there are few studies that are exploring educational interventions tackling eco-anxiety. So even though we know it exists, we don't really know how to tackle it. Potential institutional strategies. So these Galway and Field are researchers that explored climate anxiety in Canada. They did the same as the international, as the global study. They interviewed 1,000 youth in Canada to see how climate anxiety, is in Canada, and they sort of provided some recommendations. So one of them is expand climate education. Although this may cause more climate anxiety because the students learn more about it, what they were proposing is also education focused on solutions. Not only on solutions, students need to know the problem, but focusing on systemic solutions. So for example, how can from your own discipline, you can contribute to climate solutions? So recognize diverse forms of climate anxiety that they take among learners. Some forms are very mild, others are more extreme. Some forms are a very natural, normal response. Other forms may really impede learning. So it's important to differentiate how it takes place among learners. They suggest providing ongoing mental health and well-being support for students, faculty, and staff. So recognizing that this is a problem and providing, institutional support to deal with this issue. And in general, educators that are also going, teaching about these issues and also face the anxiety about this also need institutional and peer support to manage their emotions. We don't really know how to manage our own emotions, but also how, receive support so that we can support the students. And in my own case, I have had surveys, and I'll show you in my classes, 60 to 70% of students are very concerned about climate change. I try to help, but really I do whatever I think is best based on the literature, but there's not sort of an institutional support in terms, okay, how can we as a group actually support the students and support each other in dealing with these emotions. So what are some pedagogical approaches to promote care, agency, and well-being? So these again come from the literature, and very soon I'll move on to the strategies that I use in my classes. And I will only use 3 examples of what I use in my classes. So one of the pedagogical approaches is what we call holistic pedagogy. So it's similar to what I explained initially. So integrate the head, the hands, and the heart to help students process their emotions. So it's not only and not sufficient to give students information and fill their heads with information and, whatever, like how climate change is happening, but also to support them to deal with these emotions, to see how they are doing, in terms of receiving this information, and hopefully to provide practical ways in which they can involve their hands in practical activities to also help them go through the emotions. Provide emotional space. This one is really important, and it's basically acknowledging that there are emotions. In my classes, sometimes I do word clouds where I just ask students, like, how did this lesson made you feel? I just talked about climate impacts, and I did a word cloud, and the word cloud was like, fearful, sad, anxious, concerned, despair. So, acknowledging that those feelings are there and that they are shared. It's not only one student feeling like that. Reflective tools, so using structured reflection. That can be, for example, in the form of journals that can help students reflect how they feel with the content that they are learning. But also structured reflection can be in terms of group assignments. For instance, you can include reflections that the group can work together to reflect on what they are learning and how they are, processing what they are learning. Action-based learning is also really important. So it's the idea of channeling anxiety through action-based pedagogies. So sometimes having projects that are very action-based, that they are very practical, and ideally projects that focus on solutions, right? Again, I don't tell my students what the solutions are. They can think about what solutions they think may be a solution, and they can work in terms of assignments, for example, in potential solutions that are action-based. So they can actually move and apply their hands and their head and their heart into creating something that may help to mitigate climate change or to adapt to climate change. Place-based learning has also been suggested, like incorporating land or place-based approaches that connect the students to the land and to the place where they are and to the communities where they live. And the concept of critical hope. So critical hope is really important in the sense of we need to give students hope, but we have also, the literature has labeled something naive hope. So naive hope is just saying, oh, just be hopeful, everything will be fine. That's very naive. If we don't do something about it, it's not going to be fine. So critical hope is like being critical that the challenge is enormous. How can we remain hopeful in that if we work together, we may be able to mitigate, some of the impacts of climate change and reduce climate change, hopefully to some degree. Yeah, so I'm going to provide some examples of pedagogical tools, and these are things that I have used in my classroom that are informed by a little bit of the literature that I just showed. All right, so the first one is the use of serious games in the classroom. So what are serious games? So hopefully some people here play board games. So board games can be fun, and some board games focus on real life topics. And now we have games that focus on climate change. So they can be a tool for sustainability education, a fun way to learn about, the environment, in this case, climate change. There's research that shows that they have a positive effect on cooperative and pro-social behavior, so that the students connect to each other, right? And they cooperate more with each other. It also, some literature suggests that they enhance perspective taking and dialogue. So games help students to see things from another person's perspective, which is really important for solving climate challenges or any challenge for that matter. And in the case of the game that I incorporated, that I'll talk very soon about, it integrates holistic pedagogy and has a focus on solutions. So students have to think through different solutions to play the game. All right, so what did I do in my class? This was an experiment, so it was part of pedagogical research. So basically, I use collaborative board games in my climate change course to see, and I'll show you soon what did I try to measure. So 120 students consented to participate in the research because it was an actual research. And basically, I use a climate change cooperative board game called Daybreak to explore changes in eco-emotions, like whether emotions change after playing the game from before playing to after. And we measured with my collaborator positive and negative emotions. We wanted to see if any of those changes, sense of agency. We wanted to see if the games, motivated students into some form of action or feeling that they can make a difference. And perspective taking, that is again the idea that can you take other person the perspective? Can you understand the perspective of another person? So we compared with another cooperative non-climate game called Pandemic. That is a very famous game. And then we use pre and post test measures. So we tested the students before the game, they played the game for 1 week sort of, and then we tested them after the game. So what did we found? Yeah, we basically found that both games, even the non-climate game, increased the students' sense of agency at a statistically significant value. So it was good in like making students feel that they can actually make a difference. In terms of emotions, positive climate emotions like joy, hope, motivation, empowerment rose after gameplay. And only Daybreak showed a statistically significant increase. Okay, so it was statistically significant that it increased positive emotions. We saw no change in negative emotions. So positive emotions increased, negative emotions remained the same. And perspective taking. So the students shifted their strategy because they spoke with other people. 74% in Pandemic, 64% in Daybreak, that is the climate game. So we see that the game sort of supported the students in talking to each other and shifting strategies, and also attempting to persuade others, like listening to others, but at the same time expressing their own views. So yeah, so it had some degree of impact in terms of perspective taking. So what we saw is that the game can be an effective tool in the classroom to support the students to understand climate change. This is a very complex game that, if used properly, can support the students in their knowledge, while at the same time helping them, in potential increasing, feeling better about climate change and feeling that they can do something about it. Yeah, so relatively positive results. So this is another example of a pedagogical tool. This is the active learning reflection with the climate action Venn diagram. So because the students in my class sometimes feel so powerless, it's a climate change class. This is a tool that really helps them to think about climate action. So what action can they take from their disciplines or their lives? So again, I use it in Cons to 10, where I have about 200 students. I use one class to do this. And basically, I sort of gave them the definitions of, similar to what they did today. What is eco-anxiety? What is eco-grief? I prepared a survey so that students, if they want, they can share how they feel about climate change, and they can share, how concerned, sad, angry are they about climate change. And then the lesson focus on an overview of climate anxiety in general, and then this activity. So this activity is, I find it pretty good because it's sort of, the student can take the activity to their own life, and it basically asks them to think about their strengths. So what skills are they really good at? What brings them joy? So what makes them happy, and what work needs doing in terms of climate. And then they can think about climate action at the center of those three circles. So this one is like empowering because it takes climate action not from a place of like necessarily only sadness, only grief, only anxiety, but it takes climate action for a place of happiness, what makes you happy and powerful. Yes, and then we have a discussion and sharing. So I want to share a little bit of the impact that I think this activity has in my class. So at the beginning of the term, so in September, I ask students, before the course begins, like, how do you feel when you think about climate change? And this is what I get when I ask, it's a word cloud. So most of them are scared, they are anxious, they are sad, they are disappointed, worried, concerned, frustrated. I asked exactly the same question in the last day of class at the end of the term. And what I have found now is like 3 years in a row is that the the answers shift quite a bit. So you can see that hopeful is the biggest answer in the word cloud. Sure, students are still anxious. Many of them are stressed and are concerned and sad. But it's amazing, like it shifts. Like you have the big one is hopeful. You find people that are inspired, optimistic. I have hope. I feel knowledgeable, right? So you can see that, these pedagogies are maybe, hopefully, helping them a little bit in becoming more empowered about climate change and maybe hopefully removing that sense of pessimism. So the final is examples of land-based pedagogies. So I teach a field course. I do incorporate lots of field work in my courses, but this is a field course. So everything happens on the field. It happens in Ecuador, where we go to see with the students like grassroots initiatives that have been very successful in conservation. So they are also they present the challenges of conservation, but they also show what is happening. And the students have really practical hands-on projects. Like we go to the Amazon, for example, and the students actually do research, ecological research in the Amazon. And in this one, we also incorporate reflection. And I'll show you one example of an assignment. So this is an example of a reflective assignment from students in that course. And for instance, in this one, the student is reflecting about diversity, how it's so important in nature, but also in society. And this one, how being together helps you to celebrate, but also when things feel heavy. So in the course, we discuss and we go to fish markets, for instance, when you see a lot of shark captures, for example, how, your community can support you. So we try to integrate again the learning in the course with how people feel about them and try to use, in this case, a visual way, to express that learning that they have. Yeah, so for concluding, so some key points, the current global situation is severe in terms of climate change, and we are also facing a bunch of other things that are sort of, making things harder. Youth are particularly vulnerable because they will be here for longer and they are facing that higher levels of anxiety. It is a healthy emotional response, so we should not get rid of anxiety. But if anxiety is too extreme, then it won't help students to feel that they can actually do a difference. And, it will make them feel helpless. The educational system can respond. And sorry that here it's incomplete, but basically by providing more institutional support to instructors, to researchers, to staff, to students on how to deal with these emotions. And there are a bunch of pedagogical approaches that can support the students, like the holistic pedagogies, giving emotional space, reflective tools, action-based pedagogies, place-based learning. And just to conclude, some limits and cautions. So it's balancing rigor and care. It's always tricky. So it's necessary to find a balance between the demands of the academic world, right? Students still need to complete their assignments and do their work, with also providing care for them in the classroom. So finding that balance is not always easy. There are practical constraints to implementing some of these pedagogies. So just to give you one example, the board game pedagogy that I use in my classroom was really hard to implement because traditional classrooms are not set for active learning. So it was really difficult to find an adequate room where students can actually play and collaborate together. So these are small things, but that can create big barriers to this type of pedagogies. The emotional and the ethical boundaries. So some strategies may make instructors and the students uncomfortable. Like sometimes we are not comfortable talking about our emotions. So it's important to, acknowledge that and give space for that. There's a general lack of educator support and guidance. So as we said, the university system is still a little bit silent so far about climate anxiety, right? So we're just starting to talk about it, but we still don't know what to do about it. And in terms of research, there are very few studies exploring these interventions. So just some discussion and food for thought. So have you faced any of these challenges in your classroom? How can we recognize the specific ways in which climate anxiety shows up in our students? And how in our own faculties we can, support instructors and integrate sort of a systemic response so that students have a greater sense of agency. Yeah, so I'll leave it there and thank you so much for listening.
Hello, can you hear me? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fernando Tomaselli, for that excellent and insightful presentation, especially give us some examples. I think it's a very good presentation. So now we have a few minutes for questions. So I think one of you has a question. So please ask to Fernando Tomaselli. So who will be first one?
Yeah, go ahead. I think there's one question.
Yeah, who will be first one question? Ah, okay.
Hello, Fernanda.
Hello.
That was a very interesting presentation, and I'm from the Philippines, and I'm really glad that the Philippines figured significantly in your data, because we do really feel that climate anxiety with our students. I guess my question is that because of climate changes, we get disrupted a lot. Our learning here in the university gets disrupted a lot. Do you have any thoughts on how to kind of regain that motivation and that drive when these disruptions occur because of typhoons, because of heat, and things like that? Because that happens here in the Philippines a lot.
Yeah, no wonder, you have the data of climate anxiety being so high, like you are really seeing the impacts. Yeah. So what you are saying is like you have climate impacts and then it interrupts the classes, etc. And then students come back with a feeling like of despair and hopelessness.
Yes, they feel burnout and they're no
Yeah.
longer motivated to come back and things like that.
Yeah, totally. So I don't think that I have the solutions at all because I really don't. Something that I do try to focus on is like examples of positive action. So like the climate action Venn diagram is one of the examples. I do try to show students that not all is lost. Like yesterday we did a calculation with carbon budgets, for instance, and we were like, it's not all lost. It's not. And it's not like, oh, it's too late. For 1.5 degrees it may, for 2 degrees it's not, but I do try to point, as much as I can, like showing that it's not too late and trying to show examples of people that are making a difference. Another thing that I'm doing, like before I used to focus globally. I was like, you guys go and, change the world. Now I'm really trying to make them think about, okay, what is your sphere of influence? Like, can you really influence the world? No, you maybe, but very difficult. So what is your sphere of influence? It's your community, it's your university. Okay, so in that sphere of influence, what can you actually do? What do you think would be an important systemic change? I think that action is the antidote to despair. So students are also despaired because they see the impacts, but also potentially because they are also potentially not active in doing, I don't know, maybe changing climate education in their universities, maybe working in their communities, maybe starting, I don't know, a movement. So I also emphasize that, like, what's your sphere of influence and what can you actually do in that sphere of influence so that they can actually feel that they have a power. Yeah, the sense of agency is a crucial one. So just like so that in terms of sense of agency, we don't even have scales to measure it. So we're with other colleagues at UBC, we're trying to develop questions to measure so that we can actually support the students in increasing the sense that they have power, some power, to change things. But yeah, I think that hopelessness relates to not feeling power. And then the question is, how can you make your students feel powerful?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very
Hopefully
much.
that helps a little bit.
I've learned a lot. I took notes on the strategies that you've been doing in your classes.
Wonderful.
Probably get some of that. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Fernanda. Excellent talk. I have the two I have one question about, you know, some climate anxiety coming from those people, particularly just like a Philippines or from Southeast China. They are super hot and super wet. This is one of their experience, their climate change, and they are getting anxiety. One is from media.
Yeah.
The media is talking about all the climate change. You know, in the US, like CNN, they are always talking about that kind of climate change, the impact. So for both of the anxiety coming from the different way, what kind of approach you can have given to those two different groups?
Yeah, so something that I 100% agree with you. Like you just open the news and it's like, oh, like, I suffer. I am like, I don't want to read about it. You know, I'm like, don't tell me more. So absolutely, the mainstream media is like completely focused on like the negative spin on everything, and it's really hard to find positive stories. Something that I do in my class, I do it very superficially, and I feel that I would like to do it more in depth. In my climate change class, when I talk about mitigation, one of the activities is that the students have to find a positive news story anywhere in the world, but they also have to think how that positive news came up, like how that change was made. You know, so again, we link it with agency. So just to give you an example, students found that, I don't know, in Denmark, like, what was it? I think like by 2030, in the center, I think, of Stockholm, they were planning to ban cars, let's say. So the question in the activity was like, okay, how did they achieve that, right? Change happens because usually people get organized to demand a change, and then you have a change either in policy. So also I think helping students to see the good news, but thinking how did it came about, so that they can also start thinking about how can I be an agent of change and make those positive stories a reality. But I think that the positive stories should be weaved into our classes. I don't do that enough at all. But I think it should, because there are positive stories, like
Yes.
positive things are happening, but we just see all negative around us. And I think we must emphasize also that good things are happening, and we need to excel those things, like put them, you know, yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Fernanda, we have a question in the chat here from Fiona from BFU. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Yes. So I see. So any suggestions for equipping the teachers from other non-eco related programs? Yes, amazing. Thank you so much for the question. With more knowledge and skills about climate change. So I will tell you what is happening at UBC. So at UBC, we now have first what we call the Sustainability Hub. So it's a group of, you know, professors, but it's institutional. Like UBC created that, and it sort of has staff to expand sustainability education at UBC. So what they have now as part of the well-being strategy, we also have a well-being group at UBC, again, institutional support from UBC to create these groups. And there's a group working on climate well-being, right? So what they are doing, the climate well-being group, is they are creating modules, for example, for instructors in any program about climate change. So what's, you know, if you want to teach your students about climate change, what's the basics, but then also how to deal with these emotions, how to acknowledge them, and how to support the students to move into action. So again, very institutional. So it's not one instructor doing it, but it's the university that has identified this as important and providing support and funding to create these materials so that other instructors at UBC could use them. So that would, you know, I know that you are not at UBC, but I think there's more and more of these resources out there that, you know, can help you. Yeah, but that's, I guess, one of the examples. Yes, and I'm happy to be connected. If you need more information, I'm so happy. Yes, so send me an email.
Okay, thank you for that question, and thank you, Fernando Tomaselli, for the answers. So anyone has a question?
I think John had a question.
Okay, Joy, please.
Thank you. Very interesting talk, Fernanda. I'm
Thank you, John.
wondering, you talk about the media and the role of the media and how bad stories always get circulated and so on. What about the role of academics, and particularly us, in creating some of these stories that not always, not every academic is as well informed as they should be. And not every academic is up to date with the latest research. So do you think academics are part of the problem?
So your question is academics being part of the problem, like spinning bad news?
Yes.
Can you provide me an example?
Well, I've heard statements about how the world population is increasing and it will
Right.
continue increasing, and that's
Yeah.
going to be a major impact on climate change. But the
Right.
evidence suggests that population is going to peak much earlier and is actually going
Right.
down in a number of countries.
Yeah, totally. So here's where I stand, and I don't know if in academics in general, but and this is something that I'm doing with my students. I think that a big challenge that we're facing globally is really differentiating what's true from what's not true. And I think in universities, we really need to do an amazing job in trying to be as faithful to the truth as much as we can. And even if that contradicts our perceptions, and we need to be open, and we need to be spaces where we challenge each other and we learn. And I find that sometimes we are not necessarily that, but I think universities should and must. And I think if information like that is not true, population it's plateauing, and as you correctly said, in some countries, China, I think a few years ago, it was the first time in its history that population started coming down.
Yeah.
I think we must hold each other accountable, and if we change our perceptions, like let's say that I was wrong all along, it should be okay for me to change my perspective, and I should not be judged because I changed, right? So I think also in our students, something that I've been thinking so much because of the current political situation, I think that we need to learn and to teach students, because I don't know how to do this myself, to have dialogue. I feel we miss dialogue. And I think many of the challenges that we see with climate change is lack of dialogue and understanding with each other. Like why Trump does not believe in climate change, or I don't know, trying to understand what's the really deep underlying reason. Can I understand that without judging people that work in oil? So I think we need, as a society, to become better in having conversations, not debates, conversations. And I feel that universities, as a university, I feel that that's such a skill that we're not teaching, and that we should, because the world really needs it. And the other one, being open to, if there's anything that really contradicts your perspective, being open to changing. That's I find a signal of character, changing your perspective rather than weakness. But we tend to see it as weakness. But I completely agree with you. Like if there's anything that contradicts what we think is true, we should be open to it. Yeah. So scientists should be the first ones open to change.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, one more question.
I have a question, actually.
Okay, please.
So I'm curious to know, how would you encourage the students to open them up to talk about this, right, and their anxiety, and how they would come down and analyzing themselves, and part of my anxiety or emotions are related to climate change, right? It's difficult to really differentiate, saying, oh, this part is because of the climate change, and that part is because of recent happening thing,
Right.
that impacted me, right?
Right. So in my class, like I usually, because it's a climate change class, I focus straight on climate change. I don't differentiate like So I don't differentiate in, anxiety brought by other things. I find that because it's a climate change class and because the students are in forestry, natural resources, the ones that are not are interested in the environment, it usually connects to environmental issues. They may be anxious for other reasons, for sure, and I don't know about it. But my questions are usually connected to climate change because that's, the actions that I try to address are related to that. Something that I've seen surveys doing is like they always focus on climate change, the climate anxiety surveys, but they are trying to differentiate more the different emotions. Like sadness is different from anxiety. Grief is different from anger. So they're trying to differentiate those emotions a little bit. But in my class, I don't do it yet. Like I just ask, how concerned are you? How anxious are you? And then in terms of students sharing, it's like usually individual surveys, often anonymous. And then I tell students, if you don't want to share, no problem. But something that I've seen so useful is I do small group discussions. So I'm like, okay, in pairs, groups of 3 or groups of 4, discuss a little bit. And that really helps them because so many students feel bad about it, but they have never talked about anyone. So I think it really helps, at least giving them the space to open up. If they don't open up, that's okay. But at least you're giving the space. Maybe they don't open up today. Maybe they will open, in a week or 2. Yeah, so I think creating that space is really important.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, maybe last question for me. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. FernandaTomaselli gave us a very excellent presentation. In your slide, I noticed some very important information, but you did a lot of the survey to give us some questionnaire forms results. Unfortunately, I cannot see the Chinese situation. But what a pity! I hope maybe you can join. You can put in it in the next investigation, because we in China we have so lot population. So this result I think is very important for your result for your research. Okay, because in China also our government has proposed the dual carbon strategy. Maybe you know that. In 2030, our goal is reach the carbon peak and achieve carbon neutrality by 2060. So this is our goal. So I think maybe because the climate change really change us a lot. So I think we have so big land and so many populations. So the Chinese also very important. Yeah. Mm.
Yes, it is. And I was going to include it, but then I was like, oh, it's now too long, so I didn't. But
Okay.
yes, there's research. So there's a research that compares, I think it's China, Japan, the US, and I don't remember what's the 4th country, but China has very high levels of climate anxiety, higher than in the US. Yeah,
Thank you.
totally. So there are studies. I'm sorry that I didn't include it.
Yeah,
I
thank
thought
you.
about it, but I didn't.
Okay, thank you very much. And
Thank you.
so, Mrs. Lee, should I end the webinar?
Recording
No?
stopped.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. I think that thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Professor Joe, and thank you so much, Fernanda, for such a really great and open my eyes and open, a lot of people's thought about how we could work students in the forestry related topics and related to forestry education. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time. And we are running really 18 minutes behind right now. Thank you. Such a great job. Last reminder, please, only 21 days to the deadline to the AYSA 3MT, the 3 minutes thesis competition deadline. I do hope that you encourage your students to join and also watch our competition live. Sign up. Thank you so much and have a really good day, morning, afternoon, and evening, everybody. Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
See you next time.
Okay.
Thank you so
Okay. Bye-bye.
much.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Thank
Bye bye.
you.
Bye bye.
Bye.